Lots of numbers growing. So thank you everyone for joining us again for our Colorado Broadband Office, the BEAD Grantee Office Hours session. These are designed to keep you abreast of some of the big issues you need to be thinking about, and we've including our subject matter experts on a whole variety of topics to kind of help make this as smooth as possible. So today, I think we're talking with CDOT. I believe it's Joe Carter has joined us today to talk about the process for working with CDOT. So we are not going to cover any FAQs today, but we'll again always keep track of these. If you do have questions, I'm gonna hopefully you can save them for the spots where we have them designated, and please put them in the chat, and we'll respond to those as we go forward. Our does have a colleague today, but I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself and introduce his colleagues, and we'll get started. So. Oh, yes, thank you. Very quick on the format. So looking at, we are updating this with the FAQs. We're updating those as we go forward. This is being recorded. We'll make sure you have a copy if you need it. Yeah, please come with questions. I think that's going to be the most important thing, and we'll get through this as quickly as possible. But do make sure you provide your questions as you go forward. Joe, I'll be quiet and let you take over.
Great, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. I'm Joe Carter. I am CDOT headquarters, utility permitting and relocation manager, program manager. We've got a kind of a broad overview of our permit process to talk about today, and what we look at. Kind of highlighted a few things to make sure that we call those out and make people aware. I didn't really talk in terms of turnaround time, but I think that our permit writers, generally speaking, turn our permits around in a pretty reasonable amount of time, and obviously we hope that continues for everybody. So I was just going to get to it and kind of go through statute, where we get our authority, what the permit does and what it doesn't do, and where we get our rules from. So the governing rules for utility installations are actually born in a utility highway accommodation code, which is found online. So if you want to reference that, you certainly can. That's a public document, and it gives you all the code criteria for how we kind of the lens review your project through. Just wanted to ensure that people understood that fiber communications in our, within the highway utility accommodation code, the transmitting and distribution of communications are the fiber lines qualify as utility. So I want to clarify that. And then we can go to the next slide. I don't know if I have control of those or not, do I? Oh, I do. Okay. So one of the things that we've want to clarify as a function of a permit, the right to use our right-of-way as a fiber permit, and it really comes into play when we talk about other permits, because the permits are really for utility special use in fiber, but that right is already granted either through CFR or state statute. So they have a right to be there. Really what our permit is doing is really looking at your construction means and methods and granting you that occupancy or that right to occupy the right of way and construct your project. And there's some nuance there. And I just wanted to explain that there is a difference. We're not granting rights or no rights. We're just really reviewing construction means and methods, ensuring that the components that you have within your application check a certain box or check boxes as we go through. And then we say, hey, you can go out and construct in our right of way under these terms and conditions or standard provisions. The permit itself is really that an agreement between ourselves, CDOT, and the contractor. And otherwise, spelling out those contractual terms, you'll do X, Y, and Z. You'll have these things in place. You'll have insurance. You'll have this type of insurance, this amount. You'll operate under these means and methods. And obviously, that's the reason why we have a permit or what the permit does. And it establishes those terms and conditions for construction. Next slide. There are two different roles that occur within the permit. There's an applicant and there's a permittee. And what we found, so the applicant, I'm just going to read the slide here. The applicant is a person or entity that prepares a utility permit application on behalf of the utility owner. So typically this is a subcontractor. We'll have for instance, I'm going to use Excel as an example. They will be the permittee, but the applicant might be the subcontractor who's actually in the field. And that can get a little tenuous on understanding those different roles. Permittee is then the owner, the entity that owns and operates and maintains a utility facility. Regardless of who fills out the application, that permittee is on the hook for ensuring that what's being done in the field is correct. So if the applicant or maybe the subcontractor is not performing correctly, the permittee is still going to be responsible for those actions in the field. So that's a really important differentiation that occurs. But ultimately, and as the terms of the permit will show, the permittee, the owner, is still responsible for everything that goes on in the field, regardless who he has as the applicant. And you can just read that definition of permittee itself. The entity that owns and operates and maintains a utility facility and is responsible for fulfilling all the terms and conditions of the permit, or as accepted by the department, utility owner's designated representative authority in order to carry out all the permitted activities. So two different roles. We have a lot of questions about that. Next slide. So standard provisions, you'll see within the permit, we're going to open up a permit and look at that, but there's standard provisions and they're kind of boilerplate clauses, defining the rights, risk, and obligations between the parties. And you'll see that they will talk about broader process and rules around abandonment, removal, insurance, traffic control, scope, disputes, timelines. They'll also reference back to our utility accommodation code and the guiding documents which drive standards within our right-of-way. So those standard provisions are essentially setting up all of our and referring back to all of the CDOT standards for construction on the right-of-way. What we want is a really clear, defined process, a clean construction project that isn't deviating from those. So knowledge base of the applicant and the permittee about what's required, spelled out in those provisions, and you have a clean project that isn't impacting things. Obviously, if you're on an interstate, you're working in dangerous conditions, and we want to ensure that all these provisions are understood and accommodated as we're doing construction. Next slide. And then we go to terms and conditions, which really define the responsibilities around traffic control, soils, maintenance, and they can be project specific. So if you're operating let's say you're operating in a high mountain area, right, where we have actually restrictions on construction due to seasonal effects. Like we might have a moratorium on construction during certain times of the year, and that'll probably be defined in the terms and conditions of, hey, you really can't start construction until May 1st or whatever it may be due to elevation. Or in Garfield County, north of Rifle, we have certain highways that there's so much groundwater and they have the soil condition is so poor that seasonal start date might not be until June, until the area is actually dried out, because the level of damage that you would happen if you were operating outside of that dry window is really significant. Machines slipping off side slopes, machines getting stuck in our right of way just because the soil conditions typically within that wet period of time in this certain geographic location in Colorado is such that it causes a huge impact and huge mess. So there are some seasonal restrictions that you'll want to be aware of, and the terms and conditions can spell it out really depending on where you operate. If you're operating way out west in Grand Junction, we may have way fewer seasonal restrictions than if you're operating in a mountain area or really, really wet area. So just something to be aware of. Next slide. Oversight on, and this is really on larger projects. So it's the obligation of the permitter to really go through, and particularly for the environmental stuff, there's a certification when that permit is signed that the environmental aspects, or what we have listed as environmental requirements, taken care of. And I believe that there's some type of occurs. I read it, but oversight on water quality, wildlife. We have other roles as well where the resident engineer, a resident engineer is kind of the boots on the ground person in each sub-region of the state. And that permit wouldn't only be reviewed by the permit writer and the environmental group, but also by the resident engineer, and to look at where is this going? Is this going to impact the future projects that's on the books? Is this location slated for something in the future? We really want to take your permit if it's a larger project and look at it through the lens of how it's going to impact maybe your future construction project that's going to occur in the spring of 27, for instance. Maintenance section also might look at it, and they want to understand what's going to go in it. We've had issues in the past where we've asked for a concrete color around pull boxes, and they were poured at such an elevation that they were above ground level, even a couple of inches. And as we plow or as we do maintenance or mow, these become obstacles in our right of way. So maintenance really wants to ensure that how things are being installed in the right of way and what is being installed in the right of way is correct. And they also want to know that these things, we're going to be putting obviously structural features in the right of way. The maintenance section is also responsible for some minimal site inspection during construction. And as you look at the permit, you'll see that maintenance person is referenced within each permit. So you'd have not only a permit contact, you'll have a maintenance person contact as well, who would be driving by and having the authority to say, hey, you're operating in an unsafe manner. Let's remedy these things, or we need to shut you down because you're operating in such an unsafe manner that we can't let this continue under the certain process. So, and then traffic operations would also look at the permit and say, is what you're doing impactful to future traffic operations, or what type of closures or lane shutdowns do you have to actually do this installation? So another group within each region that would review a larger project and go in. And when I say larger project, it either could be a project of such vast significance that it impacts our right of way in an inordinate way, or it would be on an interstate, a really, really, a road that is of high value and high significance, where the rules are much tighter. So you'll see traffic operations come in at different points of the project, depending on those classifications. So next slide. So there's a couple of things that I really wanted to call attention to as part of the permit. One of them is as constructed data collection. Now we require as constructed data collection, typically using our Point Man application. And what that does is it gives us real world data on what's in our right of way, and allows us to it creates a repository for everything that's in our right of way. And it's not just exclusive to fiber. It goes for utilities and other special uses as well. We also now have locate companies on the Front Range that are using Point Man to enter in their data. And it's a repository of utility data that is that we reference for future use on projects. We would, if we were going to, there's a fiber line installed on our right of way and Pointman has been used to collect that data, we can open up this file and say, hey, we're going to impact this project. What type of utilities do we have out there? And because Pointman has been used to collect that data at the time of installation, we are then are knowledgeable and can see that that's out there. It's really a damage prevention criteria that we use, and we're trying to do this on all of our projects. All of CDOT's infrastructure is actually in Pointman, all of our fiber, all of our electric. As we do installations in CDOT projects for every utility, whether it be gas, electric, sewer, other telecommunications, we're requiring all those entities also use Pointman to collect the as constructed data and put that in the system. So we're, again, creating this huge repository of information through Pointman. It's a relatively simple tool to use. We ideally we would like surveyors to collect that data. In the past, we've required it, and we've been given as-built drawings, or they've been viewed as as-built drawings, and it was actually the design drawing. In some instances, the as-built drawing being parlayed or given to us as constructed data proved to be, significantly different than what was installed in the field. So this requirement has come really as a necessity to really identify where things are located and how they'll impact future projects. So next slide. So Pointman, and this is what it does. It's a data collection tool, and this is just you can see that as this is a project actually in Grand Junction, as things were installed or as data has been collected, it shows up and it tells us exactly what's in the field and where it is in an X, Y, and Z coordinate system. So we can tell you that there's electrical in your project, there's storm lines in your project, there's water, and it's really good base data collection. But that's essentially what it looks like. We attribute this data, so every point that you see, if you look on the right hand side, you can see a blow up in this cell phone, if you will. It's a mobile application. The points that were the little green dots in the center of that manhole, those are actually data points that we collected on top of that data. We could tell you exactly the inverts of each that manhole and tell you how deep that sewer line is and where it is locationally on the ground horizontally. So Pointman has been an amazing application for us, and again, it helps us with damage prevention. Next slide.
Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey, sorry. I was listening to the Colorado thing. Yeah, geeking out.
Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead, Joe.
No, that's not a problem. Let's go back to the a slide. There we go. So as we've had projects being installed on a right-of-way, one of the biggest issues that we've had with really any construction project in our right-of-way is inspection. Things are being installed pretty rapidly. We really want a consistent inspection. We want to catch things as they're occurring. We want to make sure that what's going in the ground is at the correct depth, that stormwater management issues are being dealt with appropriately. CDOT personally has had significant fines from lack of control over stormwater management, several decades ago. So it was a very, very hard lesson for us to learn. Sometimes we have unsafe practices where we have machinery operating in our median, which has zero traffic control. We've had installation depth issues where things were supposed to be installed at a certain depth by code, and they are being installed significantly shallower. We've had misspaced structural features, as I talked about, elevation issues. And then as a result of some unsafe practices, installations of certain things in our right of way have resulted in wildfire. So either it being welding on the side of the highway because they had to put pieces together and sparking a brush fire, which was an unsafe practice, or pulling vehicles off in high brush, which were really hot underneath the exhaust and causing a wildfire. So we have a lot of issues with inspection that we want to prevent. And so we'll most likely require third-party construction oversight as you're doing this. It reduces the number of punch list items. If we're operating in a safe manner, it shouldn't be an issue, but that should be an expectation of the permit. I saw a question come in. Looked like it was related to environmental. I don't know how to access those. Oh, there it is, chat. Would CDOT's environmental review be intertwined with the NEPA review required by the BEAD program? Can the environmental review completed by CDOT be used to satisfy the BEAD NEPA review?
Hey, Kyle, thanks so much for asking. We are working with CDOT right now. Sorry, Joe, to hop in real quick, but
that's
we're working with CDOT right now to coordinate what the NEPA review coordination between CDOT and CBO will look like. We'll do everything we can to make you not have to do it twice, but we're still working out the details.
Yeah, so there's another question there in terms of staffing. What's CDOT doing to put in place resources and staff needed in the district offices, particularly Durango? Yes, I understand Durango can be slower to ensure timely responses to permitting requests. I believe, and Leslie might have to answer this question regarding staffing needs. I'm aware that some offices are operating more slowly than others. And I don't know if region, if that's specific to region 5 in this instance, or if you're seeing delays in other regions. So I'd be interested to know that, Megan. But, if I'm just going to say this across the board, if we're having issues in a particular region of turning around permits, any permit in an unreasonably slow period of time, please call me and let me know. Because we have an expectation that we're staffed at a level where we should be able to turn a permit around in a reasonable amount of time. And I'll just say that personally, I don't know of any staffing issues, but I know that there have been some slower response times in Region 5. Leslie, did you want to speak to staffing?
Yes. So we have also been discussing with CBO on how they can support us in procurement for overflow and to make sure that we're not going to disrupt or have to alter any of those provisions. And the other part is that part of our partnership and what we're doing between CDOT and CBO is to backfill these permits and to really educate all of the awardees. So that way the timeliness and review of these permits will be done in such a manner. But we do have a conversation that has been started with CDOT and CBO to procure permitting support.
Yeah. So I will, I guess, briefly touch on Kyle's comment regarding environmental review. I would think it would be, and again, as Alice referenced, CBO and CDOT are working on this issue right now, but it's in everybody's best interest that we only have a single environmental review. I can't imagine anything more annoying than having a duplicative process. So we're going to work to try to streamline it and see if we can't make sure that we aren't, overburdening the applicants or the permittees and our own staffing on potentially duplicative reviews. So we're sensitive to that, Kyle. We've gone in and discussed this previously and want to make sure that we're doing it correctly. So thank you for your comment and your question. I guess, are there any other questions right now before I walk through the permit? All right. I just thought, I don't know, I would assume maybe everybody's familiar with permits, or what CDOT's permit looks like. There's a permit portal that you go through on our website. There's a chance that that permit interface web page will change, but the portal itself has no, we really don't intend to change it at all. We are going to change some search functions internally to ensure that we're able to provide better service around understanding what might be in conflict with your installations. Just some things that we've found that aren't functioning the way we'd like to, because we understand that these installations may be, long in some instance. So the first page was just really referencing Point Man, and it guides you through it. I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit here, Kristen, so we can see this permit. But generally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. Permittee and applicant, the data that's involved there. There's that activity description portion of it, and what we're doing. The purpose of what you're doing. You're installing. You're having a construction project. And you're actually doing an installation on a right of way. We want to spell out where those mileposts are, the length of what it is. And you can see on that first area in department use, that first box, it says patrol, and it says 2K15 Craig Gunstream. So that lists the patrol, the maintenance patrol that's going to be out there, and who that potential point of contact is from the person, the subcontractor doing the work in the field, and CDOT maintenance. So you've got a contact person. Sometimes that's actually even listed. Their phone number, their contact information is actually listed in the permit itself. So let's scroll down a little bit. And you can see there's a CDOT inspector listed there in that field. So you have a direct line of communication, not only from the permit writer, hopefully that you've been communicating with all the way through the process, but also you've got a CDOT inspector there in the field. Who again does kind of a cursory overview, isn't kind of the day-to-day inspector, but you do have a maintenance contact, and then any type of designated cover, anything that's listed. As you go through, as you scroll down in the permit, you've got these kind of criteria of who's signing and what you're signing for. It's pretty straightforward, and you can see where the distribution is going. Field office, a permitting applicant, maintenance patrol supervisor, landscape maintenance supervisor, an inspector. Again, if it's a project in a significant area, this permit might get distributed to the other entities that I listed above. Environmental may look at it, or traffic operations, or the resident and engineer. So sometimes, again, depending on the installation, this will be distributed to a much, much broader group than just the few that's listed there. Let's keep going on the scroll. These are the standard provisions. And as I mentioned them a little bit earlier, it references that everything that's being installed, the construction of any portion of the highway or facility. So if we're disrupting part of the highway facility, the expectation is that you're following CDOT standard specifications for road and bridge construction to repair that or replace that. Pretty straightforward plans, commencement and completion. Keep scrolling down, please. It talks about liability insurance. It talks about a threshold for plans, I think, is it's not a high bar to jump over. We really want to make sure that you are conveying what you're doing at what depth in the field, in where you are horizontally and vertically within our right of way. That's very helpful. But beyond that, our threshold for plans, I don't think, is too onerous, and hopefully everybody agrees with that. I know we've had some in the past that would be vague, and we would at that point come back to the provider and say, hey, could you give us a little more information? This line on a Google map is not really the level of detail we need see, so we understand where you're going horizontally. Ideally, we want you as close to the right-of-way line or as far away from the pavement as possible. There's some other parameters. We want you at a certain depth. So we need to convey that on the plans, just to make sure that we're understanding what you're doing, and that as the designer passes these plans off to the subcontractor, there isn't a misunderstanding here of what they're actually doing. We see that in construction all the time, where we've worked really diligently with in this instance, the permittee or the owner of the utility. But once it's passed on the subcontractor, they completely miss the design intent and begin to install the utility in the wrong location. And that's just not good from anybody. It slows down the construction, and it demands that CDOT be more heavy-handed than we'd like to be. And so if we can get that right, I think it's best for both parties. And insurance requirements, pretty standard stuff. Let's keep scrolling. And we can kind of rolling scroll through this as we go through, Christian. It talks about where our authority is, installation on freeways, joint use alternatives, attachment to structures. That could be a big issue as you guys are moving along. And we really want to know where you're going to be attached to structures and how. At that point, Staff Bridge would get involved in it. And what we do when we look at attachment to structures, it's really about loading and making sure that the structure, not that you're putting hopefully huge facilities on our bridge, but that we're accommodating all the other loading factors that are on the bridge, and that we're able to not the level of service, but the structural integrity of that bridge is maintained over time. And then there's sometimes in some areas, particularly maybe in federal lands, does that installation across that structure have to be, do we have to take into aesthetics or take aesthetics into a factor of reviewing your plan? For instance, like Glenwood Canyon, that whole bridge structure through Glenwood Canyon had an aesthetic purpose with it. It wasn't just functional. And so in some instances, there could be an aesthetic, it sounds crazy, but an aesthetic thing that we have to address, where we conduit underneath the bridge instead of on the side of the bridge or whatever. So, or sometimes maybe we can actually use existing conduit on the bridge or through the bridge, so that the fiber companies don't have to do it, or they're going underneath structures or going underneath, boring under locations. So if the structure couldn't hold it, or there's no other operation there. So structures actually could be a really big thing. And if we want to identify those pretty quickly. Drainage and water courses, where those installations are going, and our expectation of where the fiber line is going, ideally below our culvert rather than above it, depending on the depth, because if we have maintenance operations, we want to make sure that fiber is protected, and the best place to protect it would be underneath that culvert. It talks about traffic control, worker safety and health. And again, Kristen, we can keep scrolling here. And then ADA requirements, clear road considerations. You could keep going. Pavement repair, boring and jacking. And we'll just keep going through. So these are our standard provisions. We'll get to, talks about environmental clearances there and the things that we are our expectation there. Again, CBO and us have to work on that. Let's keep going. Adjustments due to highway construction. Understanding that this is one thing I'll make note of. It's really important to install these in the right location. It really is far away from the pavement as possible, because there is a relocation obligation when we put utilities in the right of way, unless it's a public facility. The owner of the utility is responsible to relocate it at their cost if any improvements had to be made in that area, whether it be a widening or whether it be a reconstruct or some other structures going in the right of way. So ideally, we're putting it in one place. It's protected from your standpoint, and then it's saved from future relocations. Again, at the owner's cost versus at our cost. Yeah, I see a message popped up. Let's see. Can you address the TCP and time limits on them? I would let you do that, Leslie, if you can. Transportation. Do you want to do that?
Sure. You were on
Sure.
such a good roll. I was just like
Oh
adding.
no, I'll let you handle that one.
So TCPs, the traffic control plans, they are asking that everyone stays mindful of them. Please don't apply for 100 miles, knowing that that is not going to be honored in the time frame that you're applying in. So with what Joe's saying in the application process and making sure that it's thorough, you can also adjust what you're asking for in lane closures and those restraints to make sure that you're not reapplying when you can just do it in sequence with that project. So also be mindful of some of these more sensitive permits and the timeframes and limits that are adjusted with those permits.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. I mean, one of the things that ideally is happening is that the permit application, regardless of how many miles or hundreds of miles your installation is occurring, ideally the permit application is going in and taking down what you believe you can do within a reasonable time frame, maybe the first year, or again, depending on seasonal effect. But I think that if hundreds and hundreds of miles or many applications are coming in and they're all segmented, because it's segmented, I think that could probably be overwhelming for us. So I don't know if I quite have a handle on how many applications are going to come rolling in on day one, but that's something that I think we want to address and see what's reasonable. Every single line segment or section that's going through, maybe we're able to combine those into one permit, and we're able to review it in a more timely manner and issue the permit versus secondary connections. I don't know what they're called, but as you go through like 12 permits, which are only covering a mile section, but there are all these different segments of installation going in. In my personal preference, we deal it with a single permit, but we'll probably handle that on a case-by-case basis. So still, again, trying to get a handle on what that means for us. Kristen, let's keep scrolling through, please. Here's the environmental clearance and information summary, ECIS, and it talks about clearance contacts in smaller projects, and maybe it's done with again with the NEPA requirements that are associated with the BEAD application. Maybe these are already taken care of. Under normal application processes, the permittees certifying that they've understood these and they've taken care of these environmental requirements. I guess more on that as we get moving through our cooperation and collaboration with CBO. Keep going. We'll get to terms and conditions, and these are project specific. Just the bigger kind of more general subheadings are all we're going to go through. There's terms and conditions of fiber infrastructure on a right of way, and that references Colorado Revised Statute and other issues about the Telecommunications Act. You're probably more familiar with that than I am, so we can keep going through it, and how we at some point had adopted in this particular application the fee. And then I think the next part of it is specific terms and conditions. Yeah, so terms and conditions specific to the project. And in each region, turning on and off these general provisions, and you can keep scrolling through, Kristen, but toggling on and off requirements and what we need for each. Related to drainage or soils or traffic or materials or whatever it may be. I'm sure these aren't particularly onerous and really are referenced in other documents, surveying, maintenance. I don't think these have ever been a major hook or problem, but again, there could be a seasonal effect that comes into place, or a seasonal restriction that might come into place that would be either there or in the body of the permit itself or on the front page saying, hey, we really can't work in this area because of X, Y, and Z. Essentially a moratorium due to weather conditions or soil conditions. There's a final inspection that goes through that, the permittee and the CDOT inspector will fill out. And then I think we get into plans next, or certain liability insurance, and then we'll get into the plans. So pretty straightforward stuff for people who haven't seen it. Are there any questions related to that? I think we're pretty much at the end of the presentation at this point. Anything? Somebody want to type a comment under there? Okay.
And so I just want to reiterate that we are having continued conversations and discussions, as what Joe said, on how to streamline and quantify this process for everyone, and get some of those harder ended questions answered, such as the time sensitive permits, the way that some of these specialized areas will be. We're trying to coordinate that not only internally with CDOT, but also making sure that when you apply that pre-permit application, that is part of the review process. So if we are going to have an expansion project or any of those additional needs, we are trying to make sure. So when we ask for the information in the pre-submittal process of where the location is and what your intentions are, we're really trying to make sure that we are saving you time and money in those pre-submittal reviews. And if you have any questions about any of this, you are more than welcome to reach out to anyone on our team, and we will do our best to make sure that we get you to the SME that can best answer it if we cannot.
We want to thank you, Joe and Leslie, for cutting online with us today and having a conversation and sharing the information that you did with us and with our applicants, because we definitely want to move as fast as we can, but we need to make sure that we're as efficient as possible as well. So we appreciate that. We had one. Okay, so we have a non-CDOT question. I was going to just close it out by opening it up if there was anything else that anyone had. So good. Megan, thank you for that. Do all marketing materials need prior approval from public communications? Yes. If you want to do a press release, we definitely want to be involved with that. And I'm assuming that's what you're saying, Megan, is that you're thinking that you want to do a public release or a press release of some kind?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just reach out to us. We have communications officer and we will get that over. Allie, I don't remember. Does it go to the governor's office as well? No? Okay,
No,
okay.
no, and y'all, we can give a little context for what happened here and why this is in our grant agreement now. So, one of the problems that we were having is that we were seeing press releases go out for locations that were brought online that hadn't been reported to us in progress reports. And so the public was hearing that something was online. We were getting questions about it. That wasn't the data that we had. And so we just want to make sure we're being really coordinated in terms of what's going out. That would not include really, Megan, if you're, subscribing people, that kind of stuff. We don't need that. It's really a press release where you're saying, hey, we've got a grant, or this is how much money we have, or we're bringing these locations online. We just want to know about it first, so that we're prepared to answer questions and that we've got a unified message. Did that answer your question, Megan?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. One other item of business is for everyone that's on the call, would it be advantageous for those that still may have questions on the certified network design and all the attributes, for us to have a session just on that. And then you could participate in that call and we could just focus on attributes and questions because we continue to get questions and we want to make sure you guys have all the answers as quickly as possible and not wait for me to answer it in an FAQ and then the FAQ to get posted. So maybe if a special session would help, Kurt, okay, you said yes. So, if you guys feel this is the case, let us know. Okay, yes, yes, yes. I'm not seeing any no's, Allie, so I think the yeses have
Nope.
it.
Michael brought this up today. He was like, "Look, we're still getting questions. Maybe we want a special session." So, Michael, I think you put your finger on it. This is great.
Yes. Yeah. So we will look at a date next week.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my calendar right now, and I have quite a bit of time open
Maybe
on Wednesday the 4th that maybe we could schedule it. And it would be from 1 until you guys get tired of asking me questions.
So Wednesday at 1, starting Wednesday at 1, Michael will hold a
Yep.
certified network design office hours, question and answering. Feel free to bring engineers or whoever you need. And Kristen will get on an email. There you go. You peek behind the curtain there.
I'm glad you said that way, Allie, because I was going to say, bring your questions and stump the chump, and I'm the chump, guys. All right. With that, if there's no other questions, we'll convene for the day. Unless
And
you have
you may
something,
have
Allie.
already, sorry, you may have already said it, and I apologize because I logged on a little bit late, but just wanted to remind you that the next two sessions are going to be on environmental and historic preservation. And so if you have consultants, feel free to invite them to the next couple of meetings. If you don't have consultants, but you're talking to companies, they are also welcome to join. So these are would love to have them here listening in, making sure that our grantees are getting the best service that we can possibly get them. I think the more your consultants know on their end, the smoother the process is going to be for all of us. So we look forward to those. Again, we'll have our environmental consultant, HDR consulting, here to walk through that over the next couple of weeks, and we're really looking forward to it. And if there are no other questions,
Thank
we'll
you
give you
very
back
much
10
for
minutes.
hosting.
Thanks to CDOT for being here. We really do appreciate
Yes.
it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Absolutely.